Welcome to Senior Living Marketing Perspectives. I'm Debbie Howard, co-founder of Senior Living Smart, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Val Whitman, VP of Senior Living for LeadingResponse. Welcome, Val.
Hi, Debbie. How are you? Good to see you.
It's great to see you. Val and I go way, way back. I don't know if it was 15 years. I don't want to date either one of us. We were both kind of regional directors of sales and marketing at Benchmark, and we got to know each other and have stayed in touch and throughout various journeys. And it's always been a pleasure. We always have great conversations, and I thought, who better to be talking with about marketing, thought leadership, and innovation. So thanks for joining today, Val.
Thanks, Debbie. Same here. It's so great to work with you. I love what everyone does over at Senior Living Smart for all of your clients.
Thank you. Well, we're talking about, just to give the listeners who may not be familiar with LeadingResponse, I can't imagine that they wouldn't, but perhaps somebody, this is a new solution. LeadingResponse, basically was a great opportunity for us to drive, very qualified prospects with high intent and the right demographics, to our marketing events. And, whether those were offsite, at a restaurant, or whether they were, on-site events or a combination, just very successful in getting the right prospects at the right time to have these face-to-face interactions with community teams. So obviously your world has changed significantly in the last couple of months as we're not doing any face-to-face anything.
Right, very true. So LeadingResponse is a client acquisition firm, and to Debbie's point, what we really specialize in is being able to connect qualified leads, adult children, seniors with the client, with the senior living clients, with home care clients. And so really being able to help them start building that relationship and taking that relationship forward. And the best way to do that is face-to-face. The best way is either, off-site, neutral location from a consumer behavior perspective, or on-site at the community. And so now in this new norm, not only can we not have folks on site to the communities, even if you're open to that, the consumer behavior, the perception is, no, we're not going to go to a senior living community right now. But also they can't go off site to a restaurant because, as we all know, restaurants have been shut down. And even though about 40 states are in phase one now, starting to open restaurants, what we're really seeing is the consumer's not ready. Even if the restaurant is open, they're not ready to go sit in a large group of 30 or 40 people like they had been pre-COVID, and understandably so. And we expect that that's probably going to continue for quite a while. And so fortunately for us, what we've also been doing alongside of those in-person events is connecting people to our clients in non-event based campaigns. So we on average would connect 200,000 consumers per month to our clients through landing pages, through transferred phone appointments, webinar platforms, virtual meeting spaces. So those solutions have really taken center stage in the absence of being able to do these in-person events.
Oh, that is so interesting. So how have you have innovated and still continue to introduce people to your clients in new ways? What are some of those new channels that you're kind of leveraging right now?
Sure. Yeah, the most popular one is the webinar platform. So, when you think about the marketing events that we traditionally do, you're educating your consumers, you're building a relationship with them, there's that, visual interaction. And so the webinar platform, which is a platform that LeadingResponse has, and it's white labeled for each of our clients. So it has the clients, branding, color schemes, look and feel through the whole user experience. That platform has really allowed clients to still get that education out to the prospects and allow the prospect to engage with them throughout that live webinar. And so, there's so many different engagement tools, things like poll questions, offers that you can submit that will come across the screen to the attendee, where they can, literally click a button and say, schedule now, to schedule a phone appointment, that next step. Where traditionally it would be maybe schedule a tour. Now it's schedule a virtual meeting, or it's schedule a, a phone call one-on-one. So it really allows that attendee to still interact with the presenter and with the brand, but do it in a virtual way where, quite frankly, everyone feels comfortable because they're in their own home, they're safe, they're still getting the information they need. And one of the nice benefits of our webinar platform is there is no need to download anything. So it's very easy. The attendee receives a link, they click the link, and they're in the browser, and they're in the webinar, what we call webinar room, almost like they would be in the room in person when you're doing a marketing event.
Oh, that's wonderful, because there's certainly a lot of barriers, where we might be comfortable with GoToMeeting or Zoom, but having to download that software and kind of figure it out, it becomes a barrier. So it sounds like they can just kind of click right in.
Right,
and
exactly.
Are you still marketing it, Val, using direct mail and all of your kind of demographics, which get down into familial connections and diagnosis, as well as income and age demographics?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So that's also one of the things that I think LeadingResponse is known for, is our hyper-targeted ability. And so, pre-COVID, we were doing 5 million pieces per month of direct mail. And essentially what that means is we have so much data, and it's all to this same consumer segment, the 55 plus, right? So we have the ability to say, okay, what's working best from a creative perspective, from the days that it hits the mailbox, from the days that the event are scheduled, the time the event is scheduled. I mean, there's just so many different great data points that we're able to leverage and incorporate into the campaigns. And so what we are seeing now is direct mail is still a viable option to communicate with the audience. It always has been. I think there's been a lot of concern about the ability to have direct mail really work for you and work in your budget and work in your marketing plan. And what I've learned in the 5 years I've been at LeadingResponse is that you have to do every piece right to get the outcome that you want for direct mail. It's like the recipe ingredients, right? So we, I think as an industry, have done some of the right things for direct mail, but then we didn't for some others. And so then we didn't get the response we wanted. And so direct mail will continue to be a viable channel for this audience. And so we are still using direct mail. If the call to action is virtual, which oftentimes it is right now, we're giving people the option. So we'll give them the option to join a webinar, or to schedule a one-on-one virtual meeting on that same platform that we use, or a phone appointment where it's a trackable number on the mail piece and it goes directly to the sales director, at the community. So the consumer is essentially saying to us, we want information, but we also want different ways to get that information, because we all know not everyone's comfortable. When the guidelines change, when we move through the phases, there's still going to be a lot of people that say, I'm still not ready to leave my house. CDC is continuing to tell this population, stay home. So direct mail is definitely still viable. We're doing a lot more with digital. And so what we're finding there is, because of the unique relationship we have, because of the volume we do of direct mail, we can take all of those hyper-targeted data points. So most people know basic demographics are age, income, proximity to community. But we also know that that's really not enough. It's basic, right? So,
right.
Get what you get, basic, right? So we look at the ailment data, the familial connections, the income producing asset, or known as IPA, all of those financial criteria in particular. And we can take those demographics that we would use for direct mail and do still use for direct mail, and we apply them over to digital, because we're a Facebook marketing partner, which essentially means we've been vetted. We spend, X millions of dollars every year with them. So we have the ability to use that demographic data versus the lookalike data, which is what a lot of marketers will do. So we actually have the specific data for those folks that meet your qualifications, and we can target them digitally.
Oh, that's great. And are you finding are the conversions different today than they were previously?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we don't have a long running time of data, right? I mean, we've been in COVID for about 2 months now. I've lost track. And so we are seeing, especially with webinars, that People are very responsive, both on the conversion of signing up for the webinar, but then also the attendance rate. And so, just to give you an idea of kind of webinars in general, for an attendance perspective, it's anywhere from, on the low end of 25 to, if you're lucky, 45%. And we're really seeing anywhere from 30 to 60% of attendance. And, we certainly do attribute that to people are home, even the adult children that are working, they're working from home. So you're not up against the challenge of, maybe a 6 o'clock in-person marketing event and the adult child's trying to rush from work to get there, and traffic and just all of those variables. So we are seeing people attending more at a higher rate, which is great. Certainly as an industry, we want to capitalize on that while we can, because again, with the phases and the reopening of the country, those adult children are going to start going back to work, and things are going to start getting crazy again from a scheduling perspective. Another thing that we're finding is the recording option of the webinar, so that that adult child or senior, or maybe family member, loved one who is part of the process, can watch that recording when it's a good time for them. They don't have to dial in live. You can also use that recording in your marketing strategies. Sure. YouTube channels, your socials, and just all the different ways that you might want to leverage that recorded educational seminar, basically.
Yeah, it really becomes evergreen content.
Mm-hmm.
And have the topics changed, Val? Are people wanting different information? I know in the past, when we've done events with you, it's been, an overview to senior living and understanding it, or the funding options. Are people interested in, is the content the same, or are they really looking for different types of content today?
Yeah, that's it's been very interesting for us to see. I mean, again, we don't have a long running data point, but of the 8 weeks that we have been doing campaigns, and I will say that, prior to COVID kind of, changing the world, it did hit the senior living industry first. You may recall there was a very large case in Seattle of a client of ours, and it was all over the news, and that was just kind of the start of it all. And so our senior living clients were impacted first before some of our other clients, legal, financial, healthcare. And so we pivoted very quickly for those clients to say, okay, can't do in-person events, let's start doing webinars. Let's start thinking virtually and what people will be comfortable with. And so we do have, about 8 weeks of data. And that data from a consumer perspective is telling us that they not only want options of how they're going to interact with you now and post-COVID, but also they want the basic information that they've always wanted and needed, right? So the differences between care levels, how do you cover the cost, how do you have the conversation with the loved one and with the family dynamics, but also what are you doing as a brand and as an industry to keep my loved one safe from whether it be COVID or a terrible flu season or whatever is down the pipe, right? So the client and the brand has an opportunity to highlight our industry. And I've talked a lot with peers about this over the last few months where, we know, because we adore this industry and this is what we do and we love it and we can't think of doing anything else, right? And so it's so important for us. We have such an opportunity as an industry to showcase the benefits of living in senior living during a pandemic. These are people that are having to stay at home, even if they're able to drive and go to the grocery store, they're not comfortable. I'm not even comfortable going to the grocery store. They're not wanting to have to deal with everything that's going on out there. And all they're doing is listening to the news all the time, right? Which we know can be a challenge. And so I think what we need to do is help the communities that we serve see what we're doing and see that although on the news there are 60% of all COVID cases in long-term care facilities, it's like this big tagline across the screen, and senior living gets lumped into the long-term care facility category, right? And so we need to be able to help communities see and do it through education of the benefits of living in senior living. Yes, they might be stuck in their apartments, but guess what? They know that their meals are being delivered to their door. They know that their medications are coming. the care that they might need behind that closed door is right there. Everything that they need, they're kind of in this cocoon in senior living communities, and they don't have to worry about what's happening outside in the world because we're protecting them, right? And so we have this great opportunity that I hope all of our clients and all of the senior living brands out there really take that as an opportunity and run with it, because I think there's a lot to be said right now about the value of senior living.
Yeah, I know we've had a lot of conversations with other podcast guests about, really taking back the narrative, because if we allow the media to control the conversation and create the narrative, it's never going to be representative of who we are. So it is important that we be proactive with that. And I think probably educational channels like videos will be really helpful, because it's going to be a long time before people get back to a comfort level around all the face-to-face interactions. And so we have to reimagine the prospect journey and how we're going to attract new leads, how we're going to nurture the ones that we already have. So are you starting to have those conversations with your clients, kind of breaking down the channels and saying, okay, let's talk about, let's use this type of topic or this type of channel for new lead generation, and maybe that's best with the direct mail and then some of the paid related paid campaigns. But then you also have, all the leads you bought and paid for that are sitting there. And is there a different strategy for lead nurturing, trust building, and advancement than there is for new lead generation?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So, it all boils down to relative content, right? And I think our industry, from what we've been seeing, is doing a good job with that. Just like we see when we see commercials on TV. For 2 months now, we've been seeing, Toyota commercials that say, we're in this together. Our service departments are still open to get your cars, serviced, and, CVS. There's just every brand out there is speaking to our current climate, right? And so we have an opportunity to do that. And I think that whether it is through direct mail or the virtual options, you really need to be able to get front and center with either existing leads who already know your brand and you've got that recognition, or you're trying to raise brand awareness with new leads. That has to be part of the conversation. And it shouldn't be the entire conversation, absolutely not, but it should be part of it. And so what we're seeing and what we're helping clients with is, for the existing lead base, they're doing great from a sales perspective of, picking up the phone and actually getting people to answer and having those quality conversations, checking in on them, furthering that relationship. But then, we're also seeing a lot of leads who, let's be honest, they haven't interacted, they haven't taken action with your brand. And so, yes, you've bought and paid for those. So what can you do with those now? And so we're seeing people interested in the webinars, people that maybe will never pick up the phone when the sales director calls them. They don't respond to the e-blasts or any kind of social that comes up on their feeds. They are looking for education. And so when you send them an opportunity to, come to a webinar, you'd be very surprised some of the cold leads that people thought really weren't viable leads anymore show up on that roster to listen into a webinar from the comfort of their home. They don't have to into the community. There's no psychological barriers there to just, click on that link and listen to a free webinar about the place that they raised their hand and had interest in maybe 2 years ago. So that on the existing lead side is working well. And then for new lead generation, we really haven't changed the strategy much. It's still the, hyper targeting of demographics. It's still reviewing the consumer behaviors and the data during this time, what they need to know and how they want to learn it. And it's the various channels, it's direct mail with a combination of digital, if your call to action is digital. So for example, a webinar or a virtual meeting space, we certainly do see a stronger conversion when you're marketing those people digitally, because it's easier for them. They click on the ad, when you think of the user experience, they get to the landing page, they register, they get their email reminders, their text reminders if they want that, they'll get our phone call reminders. And from a direct mail perspective, because again, this is still an audience that responds to that, and you want to still make sure that you're, in their mailbox essentially, but make sure it's relevant content so it doesn't come across insensitive. But be able to give them a vanity URL, for example, which is something that we do for our clients. So if they are going to a webinar, for example, it's a very short URL, because think about that consumer process. They have to take that mail piece, sit down at their computer, and type it into the URL. So it has to be very easy and very user-friendly for them to then go online and interact with you.
That's great. Hey, do you have a breakdown? Do you have enough data at this point to know of the events that you're running, what percent really are new leads versus existing leads that may feel more comfortable because it's kind of anonymous? They can listen in on a webinar without the sales pitch. It's just maybe a little more comfortable. Do you have enough data to kind of figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly looking at the data, and you know me, I'm a data junkie, so I'm always in the data. But so the way we manage these campaigns, we'll take a webinar, for example. If the client says, we want X amount of new leads, we want you to drive, 40, 50, 60 to this webinar, then we know what we need to do from an advertising perspective to get to that number that the client's looking for. And the client usually comes up with that number based on, of course, budget being one criteria, but also what is the size of their lead base? What are their other lead sources producing? Are they lease up? Are they established? And there's so many different variables. But outside of what we're producing for them for new leads, then they're able to add in their existing leads, and we can either market to those existing leads, or we give them the information and they can market for themselves. So we are seeing a combination of the existing leads coming in, as well as the 40, 50, or 60, whatever number it is that we've generated for them. So I can give you an idea, and we have some case studies that we have developed, and I'm sure more to come, where we had just a few weeks ago a client that had about 112 responders to their webinar, and the goal for that campaign was taking their existing lead base. So essentially, we took all of the leads that had an email address, because we could then target them on Facebook as well as do an e-blast. And then they said, okay, now we want 40 RSVPs that are new. And so of that 112, we had 40 that they came to us and said, you generate those for us. And then we had the remaining 70 or so that were from their lead base, which their lead base was a little bit higher than average, I would say, about 1,200 leads that had email addresses that were mostly, warm and cold leads over the course of 2 to 3 years that they had cultivated. So, I mean, that's just one example, one data point, but there's definitely a mix. But it's a great opportunity with a webinar to be able to invite new and existing. But you just want to keep in mind, the ones that you're working actively, you don't necessarily want to invite them to an educational seminar where they've already learned all of this from you. They already know. So you want to be specific with your lead base of who you want to invite for that type of call to action.
Yeah, that's great. And now you brought up the budget word. And nobody's budgets are getting bigger. So let's jump into that. I mean, I think people are going to, really be vigilant about the ROI, measuring the ROI of absolutely everything. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about what you're finding around, measuring the ROI and what the decision makers are, how they're thinking through how to spend their budget differently now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I have both good and bad memories of budgets and the P&Ls that we used to always be looking at on the senior living side of things, right? So, I think for many of us, what we're hearing from a lot of clients is, during a time where there is so much uncertainty and there are a lot more expenses, particularly around labor costs, around the need to purchase supplies and test kits, and I mean, there's just been such an enormous amount of additional expense that no P&L ever has that line item for, right?
Right.
It's the reality. So what we're seeing is, like we have done over the years when we were in senior living, from a operator's perspective, okay, everyone's budget is going to be reduced by 20%. With nursing not participating in that, of course, because labor costs are, especially a situation like this. And so the rest of the departments having to essentially do the same, if not more, with less dollars, right? And so we're doing a webinar next week where we will review all of this information. But what we're finding is, you really have to sharpen your pencil when you look at your marketing strategies, and hopefully you've got a system that allows you to identify what the ROI really is, whether it be paid digital or referral sources that you're using, or direct mail, virtual tours, services, third-party services that you're using, subscriptions, that type of thing. What are you getting for those dollars? And if you're not getting what you need, what I always recommend to clients is, if it is a third party that you're working with, you need to be able to go to them and say, I'm not happy with these results, and what can we do differently? Sometimes you need to change up the content. Sometimes you need to, look at a different call to action. You need to look at the targeted demographics that you're doing differently. I mean, you can't sit and let those dollars continue to go out the door when you're not getting the conversion rates, you're not getting the ROI. And in some cases, it's also about sales execution. I mean, we have to keep that in mind too, right? So there's that marketing engine that drives those, qualified leads, but then there's the sales execution. So making sure that there's not a breakdown in that process, you're not getting the ROI from that source because no one's calling the lead, or you're not doing the right follow-up, or they're not getting relevant content, or you're just not listening to what their needs and wants are. There's just so many pieces on the sales side of things, but from a marketing and budgeting perspective, we're going to look pretty closely at where you can get biggest bang for your buck. And I think that's going to be something that we continue to see post-COVID, because we're not going to come out of this as quickly as some other industries. We know that we're in this for the long term, in terms of even just opening our communities again to family members, to vendors, to I was on a call the other day. It's a national coronavirus task force call, and there are operators from all over the country, all different sizes of communities and services, and they share best practices. They talk about what they're finding and what they are forecasting, and it's very interesting to hear that right now everybody is still in the mode of, how do we care for our residents, continue to care for our residents? How do we make sure our staff doesn't get burnt out? How do we make sure we don't lose that staff? That's already, as we know, a major challenge in our industry. And how do we open our doors to just let family members come in and see their loved ones? I mean, never mind marketing events where 20, 30 people that are new to us may walk in the door. And what does that look like? And who pays for the tests if that's what we're going to give every person that walks in the door? So there's just so many things that they're still thinking through from an operations perspective that we're going to be dealing with. How do we connect with our future residents and continue to drive our pipeline in a very different way for the foreseeable future? And maybe this is just going to be the way it is. Maybe we're not going to be touring people after a marketing event that we host, with 30 people in our main dining room. It's going to be virtual tours. It's going to be get the education virtually. I mean, it was already going that way. They're already, for the most part, educating themselves, just like every other consumer, before they pick up the phone, before they walk in the door. So that's not going to change. But now there's going to be an expectation that, can you deliver this information to me virtually so that I only have to go tour 2 or 3 places, and I can get everything I need kind of behind the scenes before I actually step foot in the door. So I think these solutions are going to be around for a long time, and I think the quicker senior living adopts them and listens to the consumer versus this is how we want to market to the consumer, I think they're going to be ahead of the game.
Yeah, I agree. And we were spending most of our time really working with each of our clients around reimagining the entire prospect journey. and trying to find new ways. And some of the things have been so successful. It's kind of like, why weren't we doing this the whole time, right? So, marketing automation. We've been doing marketing automation for our clients for years. And it's always been delivered through a personalized, email based on where they are in their, in their journey and what they're interested in, what their motivations are. We just made a little change of having the salesperson just do a quick video, because they were missing the interpersonal interactions, and they know they're not going to have those, and that's where they're their strongest, right? So we just said, well, here we have a journey for download a brochure. So somebody comes, they download a brochure, and then they're enrolled in this whole lead nurturing to advance them to a phone call or a tour. And all of those were delivered, with, links to blogs and great content. But all we did was we embedded a video message that said, thanks for downloading our brochure. It's going to give you a great overview to our community. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. And, please don't hesitate to reach out. And it was just a super small clip. Well, it like instantly doubled our open and click rates, doubled them.
Right.
Like, why weren't we doing that the whole time?
We had these smartphones in front of us all these years now. We weren't doing that. And it wouldn't have cost us anything.
Exactly.
We see that a lot. I mean, I think one of the things that we've all realized, and we certainly hear it from our consumers all the time, and we see the way they interact with us, and that is that, they are so interested in that interaction, especially the older demographic, right? Because when we think about what we've been dealing with, being isolated, being quarantined, whatever we want to call it, we lack that socialization. And when you take a step back and you think seniors living home alone, this is exactly what they deal with every single day. Is anybody going to call me today? Maybe I'm going to see the mailman. Maybe I'm going to, see my neighbor, or, and it's sad. It really does impact you negatively over the course of time. And so I think that's such a great opportunity for us to have as an aha moment of, it is all about the relationship. We've known that in senior living. Mm-hmm. Now we just have to maintain that relationship and further that relationship differently. And fortunately, we have great technology that allows us to do all of those things. And in many cases, it doesn't cost us anything. Facebook Live, town hall meetings. We have clients that are doing, weekly calls over a conference call, webinars to their family members and to independent residents to say, hey, this is what we're doing. We want to update you. Just like the governors of every state all throughout this country are getting on TV every single day, doing their daily update. It's a great opportunity for EDs or CEOs to be able to communicate with their audience and give updates and solidify that relationship. And it's no different with our sales and marketing teams as it relates to prospects.
So you interact with, so many communities across the country. What are some of the best practices that you've seen? That's kind of question number one. And then question number two is, you also have great demographic data and consumer sentiment data, just interacting with prospects through all of the events that you're hosting. What are prospects? So I guess on the provider side, what are some of the things that they're doing really well? What are you seeing out there that's innovative? People who maybe have pivoted successfully, what are they doing well? And then what are prospects telling us that should inform new strategies?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So some of the best practices that we're seeing are people that have adopted those virtual options. So a combination of webinar, virtual meeting rooms, FaceTime. I mean, just think about the different technologies that you have available, Facebook Live, for example. So they're really jumping on board with whatever they can. Some of the very basic efforts that we've always had available to us, like we mentioned before, picking up the phone, delivering meals to seniors that are not ready to move yet, but they've been talking for a year or two. Dropping that meal or having a meal service delivery, send that over to them, waving to them in the window type of thing. I mean, all of those little small acts of kindness from a customer journey perspective, we know have, major impact. And so that's what we're seeing across the board, where, communities can just do that, right? I mean, that's just, they sit down, they develop a plan, it's low cost, sales director can get out there and do what they need to do. Same thing on the business development side, the referrals, the B2B side of things. There are still people in the hospital needing to be discharged. There are still, discharge planners and geriatric care managers and elder law attorneys, all of those folks out there are still working with clients. They, like us, are working differently with those clients, but there is still a need. And so, you just, again, need to pivot from how you're communicating and how you're managing that relationship. So that's what we're seeing for best practices. The way the consumers are responding is very much of gratitude and appreciation that they are still hearing from those brands, and they're hearing from those brands in a very genuine way. And not to say that they weren't before, but think about a traditional call to action pre-COVID. It was call for more information. It was call to schedule a tour. It was come to this in-person event, come see us for lunch, that type of thing. It was that in-person interaction. And now a lot of the copy and the creative has changed, the messaging has changed to, how are you doing? Is there anything we can do for you? And there is a way to communicate that, whether it be direct mail, digital, picking up the phone, however you're interacting, which we recommend should be, multiple ways, that omni-channel approach essentially. You're conveying to that prospect, whether it be existing lead or new lead, that you are a brand that cares about them and you want to know how they're doing. You're able to help them see that this is not just a senior living community and we want everybody to live here because we're so wonderful and, everyone thinks that we're so expensive and, all the things that consumer may have had as perceptions before. You basically are humanizing your brand to be able to say, we're in your community too, and we care for seniors. This is our business. This is what we do. This is what we're passionate about. And those caregivers that are coming to work every day that are scared because they have families at home, they have children that aren't going to school anymore, they have spouses that may have lost their job, or there's stress for everybody, right? We all feel it. Mm-hmm. And so to know that you have these caregivers that are consistently showing up to work, that those are the things that we need to highlight and get that message out. And every brand has the ability to do that. And so that's what we're seeing consumers really gravitate towards, is the appreciation for people still being front and center, but doing it differently and in a way that is relative to the situation that we're in.
That's great. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I thank you for sharing your senior living marketing perspectives with us. And if people want to learn more about Leading Response or get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can certainly just go to our website, leadingresponse.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn. They can ask you, and you can get them in touch with me. We're always here to help. So whether that's just some advice or perspective, we certainly love to work with folks, but we're also happy to just, kind of steer you in the right direction.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Val. Hopefully we'll get to see each other eventually.
Yes, same here. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.